Hey guys, Andreas here, and um, I wanted to finally get back to making some videos. I've been on vacation this week, and I've been showing some, uh, sorry, buying some records and digesting them. So you'll see a waxed eyeball eat pretty soon, and I've gotten some good ones. But so I wanted to finally answer my thread that I put up about a week or so ago. Entomology versus geology, or basically it's the Beatles versus the Stones, and a few people have answered. I think Derek and Stefan73 are the ones I've seen that have answered it so far. But yeah, no pressure or anything. Um, so basically, what I wanted to talk about is why I appreciate both bands and the phases that they've been a part of in my life. And this has been talked about a little bit with regards to the Beatles. The Beatles were the first band I heard. Um, and because my mother, she's 59, so she came up in that time, in that excitement, with the British invasion, Beatlemania, Ed Sullivan, all that. Like, she was a part of that, and she still is to this day a huge Beatles fan. Um, so yeah, I came up listening to that music and appreciating it, even as a child. But as I grew and I started to get my own music, for some reason, I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. And who was there? The Stones. Um, yeah, I just I had an attraction to the blues, because I don't think, I mean, the Beatles did have some blues tendencies, but they were more of a pop band, whereas the Stones were just like a pub blues band, and they still are to this day. Um, Derek did bring up the point that neither band, I mean, well, I mean, to those who can't play music, they're fabulous musicians, but to those of us who can play a little bit of music, neither band was like spectacular um, individually, musicianship wise. It could be argued. I think that Mick Taylor was a very good guitarist. Probably the best guitarist the Stones had. Um, and Bill Wyman was a great bass player. Charlie Watts is a pretty decent drummer, but he does have that. I don't know if you ever watch him play, but when he comes down on the downbeat and I don't know. You just watch the Stones, you'll know what I mean. But yeah. So the Beatles were my childhood. The Stones were my adolescence. Um, that's it in a nutshell. But I can go deeper and say that, like, when I started experimenting, because obviously I've led a life that's full. I started experimenting with drugs. My attraction went back to the Beatles because the Stones, I mean, they had a couple albums. Their Satanic Majesty's Request was pretty much the only foray in psychedelic music, and the Beatles kind of hung on to that for a couple albums, 3 or 4 albums, and so naturally I gravitated towards that. But of course, by then I had discovered better bands, you know. Um, but what they represent, the Beatles are creatively a better band. They accomplish more in their run of albums than the Stones have. creatively. But why I like rock and roll, and why I was attracted to the Stones is because the Beatles to me, especially when I was going through puberty and becoming really interested in girls and um, the desire to satisfy whatever whatever we're supposed to satisfy. It was back to the Stones again because the Beatles were like prim and proper, and you know if you ever watch live performances, they were boring. I mean, I don't know what the excitement was. I mean, you had some crazy rock and rollers in the '50s, and then the Beatles come along, and they're just you know that's it, and that's all it took, really. I mean, Elvis was like shoving his dick in your face, and you get off on that. I don't get it. Of course, I'm not a teenage girl, obviously, but the Stones just seem to ooze sexuality to me, and I know some of you, you know, I mean, I know Derek, for example, isn't necessarily attracted to that. He sees more, it's more one dimensional. But if you get down to brass tacks, as a species, that's what we're built for, you know. Um, as far as humanity is concerned, though, we have this, the ability to reason, the ability to choose what we want, what we do not want or need, and choose to walk a path or another path or multiple paths, which I prefer to do. Um, but I think the Stones satisfy those base needs, you know, for aggression and the things that I needed when I was coming into my own, as far as my musical path, and um, all my friends were Stones. I mean, still are for the most part. They're all about the Stones, just because of we were all punks. We were all rockers. We didn't really have a desire. I mean, to get that creative because um, we weren't in it for the music. Um, as musicians, we were in it to get our rocks off, like in more ways than one. Not just sexually, but get that angst out, get that aggression out, get the uncertainty or whatever. And I'm still experiencing that kind of stuff to this day, but it's not to the same degree. And that the Stones satisfied. The Beatles, for me, taught me how to. Uh, I haven't written any awesome songs. You're your own worst critic, so I'm not going to say I've written a magnum opus or anything like that. But any of the songs that I wrote, that I recorded and released, I was proud of. And it wasn't because of the Beatles. It was because of the Stones. Because I knew, you know, um, I wasn't a good musician. I didn't have an orchestra backing me up. It was just me and my friends. You know. Um, and yes, the Stones did have some backing. You had saxophone here. Occasionally had string arrangements. But it just seems the Beatles, like every song that they wrote past a certain point, had to involve multiple musicians. Multiple instruments. And I don't know that many talented people. Or I didn't. I do, I do now. But like back when I first started making music, it was all about the Stones. And yeah. So, yeah, I'm still firmly in both camps. I still don't have any Beatles records. If I were to grab any, it would probably be uh, the White Album and Revolver. You know, um, those were my two favorites as when I was a kid. Um, yeah, and I don't have all the Stones records either. And I just find that I'm past that point. So, anyway, that's as good as a response as I want to give right now. Maybe there'll be a sequel to this. Maybe there won't be. But if you guys still want to answer the question, get in touch. Love you, and I'll see you soon.